The espresso machine's hiss punctuated the evening like an angry cat, steam rising and wispy tendrils that disappeared into the dim lighting of Cafe Milano. I wiped my damp hands on the black apron tied too tightly around my waist. My fourth double shift this week, evident in the dark circles beneath my eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. My reflection in the polished chrome of the machine showed a woman I barely recognized anymore. Hollow-shaped, exhausted, invisible to the world except when someone needed their cup refilled. "Order up, Izzy." Tony, our perpetually irritated chef, slammed the bell with unnecessary force, making me flinch. I balanced the plates along my arms with practiced precision, the weight familiar after years of carrying other people's needs. The cafe smelled of garlic, butter, and the lingering cologne of businessmen who thought their tips were generous when they barely covered my bus fare home. Rain pattered against the windows, turning Chicago's October evening into a watercolor of street lights and hurried shadows. That's when I first noticed him. He sat alone in the corner booth, the one reserved for special guests, though I hadn't seen Tony escort anyone there. The stranger's presence seemed to bend the air around him, commanding attention while simultaneously deflecting it. His suit wasn't just expensive. It was different, tailored to his broad shoulders in a way that spoke of European craftsmanship. Even from across the room, I could see his hands, strong, deliberate, adorned only with a single gold signet ring that caught the light when he turned the page of a leather-bound notebook. "He's been waiting 15 minutes, hissed Carol, the senior waitress who never let me forget I was one mistake away from unemployment. Stopped daydreaming. I delivered the plates with apologies and forced smiles before approaching the corner booth, my heart inexplicably racing. As I drew closer, I caught his scent, something woodsy and exclusive. Nothing like the department store samples my ex used to douse himself with. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to Cafe Milano." My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "Can I get you something to drink while you look at the menu?" He looked up and my practiced waitress smile froze. His eyes were amber fleck, watchful like a predator's, surrounded by laughter lines that suggested warmth his expression didn't currently offer. Beneath perfectly groomed dark hair that showed the barest traces of silver at the temples, his face could have belonged on a Renaissance painting. All sharp angles and perfect proportions. "Beau," he said, his accent subtle but unmistakably Italian. Each syllable deliberate. "Your oldest vintage." I hesitated. "I'm sorry, sir. I'll have to check if Tony keeps it for special occasions." The stranger didn't smile, but something shifted in his expression. "Tell him it's for Dante." The name rippled through the restaurant, though he'd spoken quietly. I noticed for the first time that Tony was watching our interaction with unusual intensity from the kitchen doorway. The normally loud dining room had subtly quieted. Conversations continuing, but with a new awareness like prey animals sensing a wolf among them. I nodded and retreated, feeling his eyes follow me across the room. Tony intercepted me before I reached the bar, his face uncharacteristically pale. "Whatever he wants, Izzy, he gets. Understand. The best table, the best service." He gripped my arm with surprising strength. "And for God's sake, don't stare at him." "Who is he?" I whispered. Tony's laugh held no humor. "Someone who could buy this entire block and turn it to dust on a whim. Just serve him and keep your head down." I returned with a wine that cost more than my monthly rent, pouring it with hands that trembled slightly despite my best efforts. When our fingers brushed as I handed him the glass, an electric jolt shot through me. His hand was warm, the skin unexpectedly smooth, except for calluses I couldn't identify. "Thank you." His eyes lingered on my face, then dropped to my name tag, Isabella. The way he pronounced my full name, not the shortened version everyone used, sent a shiver down my spine. No one had called me Isabella since my grandmother passed away. "Just Izzy is fine," I said immediately, regretting the correction when his eyebrow arched slightly. "I prefer Isabella." There was no room for negotiation in his tone. "It suits you better." The rest of my shift passed in a strange haze of awareness. No matter what table I served, my attention remained tethered to the corner booth where Dante sat, occasionally speaking in rapid Italian into a sleek black phone, his voice too low to catch actual words. Twice men in dark suits entered, spoke briefly with him, and left without ordering. The second man slipped him a small envelope that disappeared inside his jacket. By 11 o'clock, the restaurant had emptied, except for his table. Tony had already sent the kitchen staff home, but insisted I stay until our mysterious guest decided to leave. I wiped down tables and restocked silverware, hyper-aware of being watched, but not brave enough to meet his gaze directly. The bell over the door jangled harshly, breaking the silence. 3 men stumbled in, their loud voices and unsteady movements marking them as drunk before I even caught the sour smell of alcohol that accompanied them. "Kitchen's closed," I said automatically, moving toward them to block their path further into the restaurant. "We don't want food, sweetheart," the tallest one grinned, revealing a gold tooth. "Just a little conversation." I felt rather than saw Dante shift in his seat. "I'm sorry, sir, but we're closing. You'll need to leave." I kept my voice professional despite the sudden dryness in my mouth. The second man, wearing a leather jacket with 2 mini zippers, stepped closer. "Don't be like that. We just want to sit a while, right, boys?" Tony emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands nervously on a towel. "Gentlemen, please. We're closed." "Shut up, old man," snapped Zipper Jacket, his eyes never leaving my face. "We're talking to the pretty lady here." I took an instinctive step backward, bumping into a table. The water glasses I'd just filled wobbled dangerously. The single word cut through the tension. Quiet, but carrying the force of a gunshot. Dante hadn't risen from his seat, hadn't raised his voice, but the command in that one word was unmistakable. For the first time, the drunk men seemed to notice him, their bloodshot eyes widening as they took in his presence. "Mind your own business, fancy suit," said Goldtooth, though with noticeably less confidence. In one fluid motion, Dante stood, revealing his full height and the athletic build his tailored jacket had partially concealed. I won't repeat myself. I should have been relieved to have a defender, but something in his posture, the controlled violence of a cobra preparing to strike, frightened me more than the drunks. This wasn't a man used to being disobeyed. What happened next occurred so quickly, I had trouble processing it. Goldtooth reached inside his jacket. A metallic glint caught the light. My body moved before my mind could catch up. Years of protecting my younger siblings from our mother's violent boyfriends, triggering an instinctive response. I lunged forward, shoving Dante aside just as a deafening crack split the air. Fire erupted in my shoulder. A white-hot poker of pain that stole my breath and sent me stumbling backward. I heard more than felt the impact as my body hit the hardwood floor. The ceiling spinning above me as warm wetness spread across my chest. More gunshots followed, 3 in rapid succession, but they sounded distant underwater, shouting the crash of furniture, running footsteps. Through it all, I remained strangely detached, watching red bloom across my white blouse with academic interest. Then Dante's face appeared above me, his features transformed by a rage so pure it seemed to radiate heat. Gone was the controlled businessman, replaced by something ancient and terrifying. He barked orders in Italian, his hands now stained with my blood, cradling my face with incongruous gentleness. "Isabella," he said, my name a prayer and a curse simultaneously. "Why would you do that, stupid brave girl?" I tried to answer but could only cough, tasting copper. "Don't speak." His thumb brushed my cheekbone. "Help is coming. Stay with me." The last thing I registered before darkness claimed me was the press of his lips against my forehead and his whispered promise. "I will burn this city to the ground if you leave me now." I didn't understand why a stranger would care if I lived or died. I didn't understand the possessive fury in his voice. But as consciousness slipped away, I knew with absolute certainty that I'd made a terrible mistake, not in taking that bullet, but in drawing the attention of a man who looked at me like I was already his. The chaos of sirens and shouting faded, replaced by the steady rhythm of Dante's heartbeat against my cheek as he lifted me into his arms. My last conscious thought was that I'd never felt so fragile and so safe at the same time. A contradiction that would come to define my entire existence from this moment forward. I drifted through fragments of consciousness like scattered puzzle pieces. Bright lights, urgent voices, the antiseptic smell of hospital corridors. Pain ebbed and flowed, sometimes distant, sometimes so sharp it jolted me from the comfortable darkness. Through it all, one constant remained. The sensation of someone holding my hand, a warm anchor in a sea of confusion. When I finally opened my eyes fully, sunlight filtered through Venetian blinds, casting prison bar shadows across unfamiliar walls. This wasn't a hospital room, at least not like any I'd seen before. The space was expansive with high ceilings and what looked like genuine artwork hanging on soft blue walls. Fresh flowers perfumed the air, their vibrant colors almost offensive against the sterile whites and creams of medical equipment. "You're awake." The deep voice startled me. I turned my head, even that small movement sending ripples of pain across my shoulder, to find Dante sitting beside the bed. He'd exchanged his suit for dark jeans and a simple black button-down with rolled sleeves, revealing forearms corded with muscle and adorned with a single elegant watch. Despite the casual clothes, he radiated the same dangerous energy I remembered from the restaurant. "Where am I?" My voice emerged as a rasp, my throat desert dry. He reached for a glass of water on the bedside table, his movements precise and controlled as he held it to my lips. "My home. Private wing." I sipped gratefully, trying to process his words. "Private hospital wing in your house." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "When you need medical attention as often as my associates do, it becomes a necessary investment." The water caught in my throat as memories flooded back. The gun, the searing pain, the sound of more shots after I fell. "The men who came in," I started, "are no longer a concern." His expression hardened, amber eyes turning to flint. "One is dead. The others will wish they were once they're found." The chill swept through me despite the plush blankets covering my body. The casual way he spoke of violence should have terrified me. Instead, I found myself more disturbed by my lack of horror. "How long have I been here?" 3 days. His jaw tightened. "You lost a significant amount of blood. The bullet missed major arteries, but damaged muscle tissue. The doctor says you were lucky." Wasn't the word I would have chosen. I attempted to sit up, gasping as pain lanced through my left shoulder. Instantly, his hands were there supporting me with surprising gentleness, arranging pillows behind my back. "You need to rest," he said, his face uncomfortably close to mine. "Recovery will take time." "I need to call work," I said, suddenly panicked. "Tony will fire me if I don't." Dante's laugh cut me off, a sound both genuine and unsettling. "Tony will not fire you. The restaurant is closed indefinitely for renovations, which it desperately needed anyway." The casual way he spoke of my workplace closing sent another wave of anxiety through me. My job at Cafe Milano barely covered my bills, but it was all I had. "I can't afford to lose that job," I whispered, hating the weakness in my voice. "I have rent due next week and my sister's tuition payment. Your financial concerns are resolved." He said it simply, as though informing me it might rain later. "Your apartment has been paid through the year. Your sister's education is covered. Your mother's medical bills are settled." I stared at him, unable to process what he was saying. How did he even know about my family? About my mother's chronic health problems that had devoured my savings and driven me into debt? "Why would you do that?" My voice trembled between gratitude and suspicion. "You don't know me." Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "You took a bullet meant for me, Isabella. In my world, that creates a debt that can never truly be repaid." I didn't know what I was doing, I admitted. It was instinct, precisely why it matters. He leaned forward, his gaze intensifying. "Anyone can perform calculated heroics when weighing potential rewards. True character reveals itself in split-second decisions. You protected a stranger at risk to yourself." His hand moved to my face, fingertips tracing my cheekbone with a delicacy that belied their strength. "Do you have any idea how rare that is?" I wanted to look away, but found myself trapped in his gaze. Up close, I could see flecks of gold in his irises, the faint scar bisecting his left eyebrow, the day stubble darkening his jaw. He was older than I'd initially thought, late 30s perhaps, with fine lines etched by experiences I couldn't begin to imagine. A discreet knock at the door broke the moment. Dante straightened immediately, his expression closing like shutters. "Enter," he called, voice shifting to something harder. A man in a tailored suit stepped in, nodding respectfully to Dante before his eyes flickered to me with undisguised curiosity. "Sorry to interrupt, boss. Alessandro's here with the information you requested." "I'll be right out," Dante replied, dismissing him with a slight gesture. The man retreated, closing the door silently behind him. "Boss," I echoed, feeling suddenly small in the large bed. Dante studied me for a long moment, calculation evident behind his steady gaze. I think you've realized I'm not simply a restaurant patron. Isabella, who are you? I asked, though I wasn't certain I wanted the answer. He stood, smoothing non-existent wrinkles from his shirt. Rest now. We'll talk more when you're stronger. The firmness in my voice surprised us both. I'm lying in your home, apparently indebted to you for things I never asked for. I deserve to know who you are. For a heartbeat, anger flashed across his features. The instinctive reaction of a man unaccustomed to being challenged. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. A genuine expression that transformed his face from intimidating to devastating. Dante Moretti, he said, inclining his head slightly as though we were being formally introduced at a cocktail party rather than in a sick room. My family oversees certain business interests throughout the Midwest. The deliberate vagueness wasn't lost on me. You're in the mafia. His smile didn't falter, though it took on an edge. Such an American term. We prefer familia. Family. A hysterical laugh bubbled up from my chest, sending fresh pain through my shoulder. I took a bullet for a mafia boss. This can't be happening. And yet here we are. He checked his watch. I must attend to some matters. Carlos will be outside your door if you need anything. Try to rest. Wait, I called as he reached the door. When can I go home? He paused, his back to me, shoulders tensing almost imperceptibly. When it's safe. From what? He turned, his expression unreadable. The men who came to the restaurant weren't random drunks, Isabella. They were sent by someone who wants me dead. Someone who now knows your face. Cold dread settled in my stomach. Because I helped you. Because you saved me. His voice softened. And in doing so, you placed yourself in a game with rules you don't understand and players who won't hesitate to use you against me. I never asked to be part of your world, I whispered. Few do. His smile held no humor now. Yet here you are regardless. After he left, I sank back against the pillows, mind racing despite the medication dulling my senses. Outside my window lay a manicured garden surrounded by high stone walls. Beyond those walls was my life, modest and struggling, but mine. Somehow, I knew returning to it would be far from simple. Sleep claimed me eventually, dragging me into dreams where I ran through endless corridors, pursued by faceless men, while Dante watched from the shadows, waiting to catch me when I fell. I woke to darkness, momentarily. Disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings, a small lamp glowed softly on the bedside table, illuminating a tray with covered dishes. The smell of food made my stomach growl, reminding me I hadn't eaten a proper meal in days. As I reached for the tray, movement in the corner of the room startled me. Dante sat in a leather armchair, reading glasses perched on his nose as he reviewed documents. He looked up at my movement, removing the glasses in one smooth motion. You should eat, he said, nodding toward the tray. The doctor says you need to regain your strength. Have you been watching me sleep? I asked, unsure whether to be disturbed or comforted by his presence. Not continuously. He set his papers aside. I have a business to run. Right, your business. I couldn't keep the sarcasm from my voice as I uncovered a bowl of what appeared to be homemade soup, steam rising in fragrant tendrils. He observed me with that unnerving stillness. You disapprove of organized crime. Generally, yes. Yet you saved the life of a man you suspected was dangerous. I sipped the soup, rich chicken broth with delicate pasta, buying time to consider my response. I didn't think about it. I saw someone in danger and reacted. Exactly. He leaned forward. Pure instinct, no calculation. It's what makes you exceptional. The intensity in his voice made me uncomfortable. I focused on my soup, avoiding his eyes. I'm not exceptional. I'm a waitress with a mountain of debt and a bullet hole in my shoulder. Not anymore. My spoon clattered against the bowl. What does that mean? He stood, moving to the foot of my bed with that predatory grace that seemed to be his default. It means your life as you knew it is over, Isabella. Whether you intended it or not, you've been drawn into my world. I don't want to be in your world, I protested. Few choices remain once you've saved a man like me. His hands gripped the footboard, knuckles whitening slightly. There are protocols, expectations. You're now under my protection, which means you're also under my authority. I'm not yours to command, I said, heart racing at the implied threat beneath his words. Something darkened in his expression. Everything in my territory is mine to command. I'm not a thing, I whispered, fear and indignation battling within me. He moved suddenly, circling the bed until he loomed over me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. No, you're not a thing. You're infinitely more valuable and more dangerous. Without warning, he sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress dipping under his weight. His hand captured my chin, tilting my face up to meet his gaze. Do you know what happens to people who save the lives of men in my position, Isabella? I shook my head slightly, constrained by his grip. They become liabilities, potential weaknesses that enemies can exploit. His thumb traced my lower lip. The touch so light it might have been imaginary. The smart move would be to eliminate that liability. Fear constricted my throat. Are you going to kill me? The question hung between us, heavy with possibility. Then Dante laughed, the sound warming the room despite its edge of danger. Kill you? No, little lioness. I'm going to keep you. His hand slid from my chin to cut my cheek. The gesture possessive yet oddly tender. Close to me, where I can ensure your safety. Where no one can use you against me. Where I can watch over what's mine. I'm not yours, I repeated, though the words sounded hollow even to my ears. His smile was that of a predator who knows its prey is already cornered. You became mine the moment you stepped between me and that bullet. The sooner you accept that reality, the easier your adjustment will be. And if I refuse to accept it, I challenged. Recklessness born of fear making me brave. His expression softened, thumb brushing away a tear I hadn't realized had fallen. Then we have a problem, Isabella. Because while I admire your spirit, I will not risk your safety or mine by allowing you to walk away. The gentle touch bell. I was trapped in a golden cage, held by a man whose tenderness was as terrifying as his cruelty might be. Get some rest, he murmured, rising from the bed. Tomorrow, when you're stronger, we'll discuss your new position. Position? I echoed. He paused at the door, silhouetted against the hallway light. Everyone in my household serves a purpose, Isabella. Even you. As the door closed behind him, I realized I had exchanged one form of servitude for another. From waitress to whatever Dante Moretti decided I would become. The difference was that at Cafe Milano, I could quit. Something told me that walking away from Dante wouldn't be nearly so simple. Morning arrived with a gentle knock and the entrance of a slender woman in a crisp uniform carrying fresh towels and a garment bag. Good morning, Miss Isabella. I am Francesca, she said, her Italian accent more pronounced than Dante's. Moretti asked me to help you prepare for the day. Prepare for what? I asked, struggling to sit up. Francesca smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. Mr. Moretti wishes to introduce you to the household staff this afternoon. He thought you might appreciate assistance with bathing given your injury. The thought of meeting staff while looking like a hospital patient made me grimace. I nodded gratefully, allowing Francesca to help me from the bed. My legs trembled, weak from disuse, and my shoulder throbbed despite the medication coursing through my system. The bathroom attached to my room was obscenely luxurious. All marble and gold fixtures with a walk-in shower that could have fit my entire apartment bathroom inside it. Francesca helped me undress, her professional demeanor never wavering, despite the ugly bruising that spread from my bandaged shoulder down my side, like watercolor on wet paper. How many people work here? I asked as she washed my hair, careful to keep soap from my wound. At the main house. 22, she replied. Plus security rotation main house. I echoed, trying to imagine a place large enough to require 22 staff members. Francesca hesitated before answering. Moretti owns several properties. This is his primary residence in Chicago. After the bath, she helped me into unfamiliar clothes, silk pajamas, and a cashmere robe that slipped like water against my skin. The garments fit perfectly, raising uncomfortable questions about how Dante knew my size. These aren't mine, I said. Moretti had them delivered yesterday. Francesca brushed my hair with gentle strokes. He's very attentive to details. The way she said it suggested this attentiveness wasn't always directed toward clothing. I swallowed my next question, unsure I wanted the answer. Francesca led me not back to bed, but to a chaise lounge positioned by the window, where sunlight illuminated a beautiful garden beyond. The grounds extended far beyond what I'd glimpsed yesterday, with manicured lawns giving way to what appeared to be a small orchard in the distance. Would you like breakfast now? Francesca asked, arranging pillows to support my injured side. My stomach growled in response. Yes, please. She returned minutes later with a tray of pastries, fresh fruit, and coffee that smelled divine. As I ate, I caught sight of movement in the garden below. Dante, dressed in athletic clothes, sparring with a younger man on a gravel terrace. Even from a distance, the controlled power in his movements was mesmerizing. He moved like someone who had spent a lifetime learning how to hurt people efficiently. He trains every morning, Francesca said, following my gaze. No matter where in the world he is, who is he fighting with? Luca, his nephew and head of security. As she paused, something like warning in her tone. Moretti is very protective of his family. Before I could ask more, the sparring session ended. Dante clapped the younger man on the shoulder, then glanced up directly at my window. Even from this distance, I felt the weight of his gaze. He raised a hand in greeting, a gesture so normal it seemed out of place coming from him. Francesca cleared her throat. I'll return in an hour to help you dress for your meeting. Left alone, I sipped my coffee and tried to make sense of my situation. 3 days ago, I'd been a waitress worried about making rent. Now I was recuperating in a mafia boss's mansion, wearing clothes that probably cost more than my monthly salary, about to be introduced to the household. The surreality of it all hit me in waves. I was still contemplating my bizarre circumstances when the bedroom door opened without a knock. Dante entered, freshly showered, his hair damp and curling slightly at the temples. He'd exchanged his workout clothes for dark slacks and a light blue button-down. The sleeves rolled to expose those same muscular forearms I'd noticed yesterday. You're looking better today, he said, assessing me with a sweep of his gaze that felt almost physical. How's the pain? Manageable, I replied, suddenly conscious of my casual attire. Thank you for the clothes. They suit you. He moved to the window, standing close enough that I caught the scent of his soap. Something citrusy and expensive. Did you sleep well? As can be expected. I sat down my coffee cup, needing something to do with my hands. Francesca mentioned you want me to meet the staff. He nodded, still looking out at the garden. They need to know your position in this household. There was that word again, position. And what exactly is my position? He turned to face me, expression unreadable. That depends on you. I don't understand. My enemies believe you're significant to me. He stated this like an irrefutable fact. After what happened at the restaurant, your connection to me has been noted. Whether you like it or not, you're now perceived as valuable or dangerous, depending on who's looking. I swallowed hard because I saved your life. Because you saved my life without knowing who I was. His eyes darkened. If you had known, your actions could be interpreted as serving your own interests. But you didn't know. You acted purely to protect another human being. At great risk to yourself, he moved closer, his presence overwhelming in the confined space. Such selflessness is rare in my world. It makes you both precious and a target. I don't want to be either, I whispered. What you want ceased to matter the moment that bullet entered your shoulder. His voice remained gentle despite the harshness of his words. Now we must deal with what is. And what is that exactly? I asked, unable to keep frustration from my voice. You have 3 options. He counted them off on his fingers. 1. You join my household in an official capacity. Perhaps as my personal assistant, you would have protection, comfort, and my resources at your disposal. What would I have to do as your assistant? I couldn't keep suspicion from my tone. Nothing inappropriate, Isabella. I don't force women into my bed. Heat flooded my cheeks. I didn't mean you did. He interrupted. And it's a fair concern, but I'm a businessman, not a monster. My assistant manages my schedule, handles correspondence, accompanies me to certain functions. It's a position of trust. And the second option, I asked, eager to change the subject. You leave. His expression hardened. With a new identity, in a new city, under my distant protection. You'd never return to Chicago or contact your family again. My heart stuttered. That's not an option. My sister needs me. My mother would be provided for. He finished. But you'd never see them again. It's the only way to ensure their safety as well as yours. Panic clawed at my throat. You said there were 3 options. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. The third option isn't really an option at all. If you refuse the first 2, if you attempt to return to your old life without precautions, my enemies will find you. They will use you to get to me, and they will not be kind. The clinical way he described my potential torture or death sent ice through my veins, so I either work for you or disappear forever. Put simply, yes, he reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear with surprising tenderness. Though I hope you'll see it as more than mere employment. I protect what's mine, Isabella. my family, my people, those under my care want for nothing. Except freedom, I said quietly. His hand lingered near my face. Freedom is an illusion. We're all bound by something. Poverty, obligation, fear. I'm merely offering golden chains instead of iron ones. Before I could respond, another knock sounded at the door. Dante stepped back, calling permission to enter. Francesca appeared, arms laden with clothing. Everything is ready downstairs, Mr. Thank you, Francesca. He turned back to me. I'll leave you to dress. Join me in the study when you're ready. Francesca will show you the way. After he left, Francesca laid out the clothes on my bed. A simple but elegant navy blue dress, soft leather flats, and delicate underwear that still had price tags attached, all in my exact size. He had these delivered from Neiman Marcus yesterday, she explained, helping me out of the robe. Moretti said you would prefer something comfortable but appropriate. The fact that he'd thought about what I might prefer was oddly touching despite the circumstances. Francesca helped me dress, careful of my injured shoulder, then guided me through a maze of hallways that confirmed the enormous scale of the house. We passed artwork that belonged in museums, antique furniture that whispered of old money, and security cameras disguised as architectural elements. The two guards we encountered nodded respectfully as we passed, their eyes cataloging me with professional assessment. Francesca stopped before a heavy wooden door, knocked once, then opened it without waiting for a response. Miss Isabella, sir. The study was a testament to masculine luxury, leather furniture, dark wood paneling, and walls lined with books that appeared well-read rather than decorative. Dante stood at a large desk, conversing quietly with three men who turned to stare as I entered. Thank you, Francesca, Dante said, dismissing her with a nod before approaching me. Isabella, I'd like you to meet some of my associates. The introductions passed in a blur. Luca, the nephew I'd seen sparring earlier, Giovanni, an older man whose silver hair and expensive suit exuded authority, and Michael, whose American accent stood out among the Italian voices. All three men examined me with barely concealed curiosity. Gentlemen, Dante said once the formalities concluded, Isabella will be joining my household as my personal assistant. She is to be afforded every courtesy and protection. Is that understood? The men murmured agreement, though I caught the significant look that passed between Giovanni and Michael. Sir, Giovanni ventured. Perhaps we should discuss the Castellano matter before later. Dante cut him off, his tone brooking no argument. For now, I'd like a moment alone with Isabella. The men filed out, Luca pausing to squeeze Dante's shoulder in what seemed a gesture of support or warning. When the door closed behind them, Dante gestured toward a leather sofa. Please sit. You shouldn't be on your feet too long. I sank into the soft leather, overwhelmed by the morning's events. I don't recall agreeing to be your assistant. He poured 2 glasses of water from a crystal decanter, handing me one before sitting opposite me. Would you prefer I introduced you as my hostage? Despite everything, a startled laugh escaped me. Is that humor, Mr. Dante? He corrected, a smile softening his features. And yes, contrary to popular belief, men in my position occasionally appreciate irony. I sipped my water, buying time. You announced my position without consulting me. A necessary formality. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. My organization operates on clear hierarchies. Ambiguity creates vulnerability. By establishing your role, I've placed you under my direct protection, which means anyone who harms you answers to me personally. The implication hung between us, and if I still want to leave, then say so, and arrangements will be made. His expression remained neutral, but something in his eyes tightened, though I hope you'll give this arrangement a chance. I asked, genuinely curious. You could have any assistant you wanted. Why keep a waitress with no qualifications who knows nothing about your world? He studied me for a long moment, as though deciding how much to reveal. Several reasons. First, practicality. You've already seen too much. Second, appearances. My reputation would suffer if I failed to reward someone who saved my life. And third, he paused, something shifting in his expression. You intrigue me, Isabella. Your selflessness, your courage, these are rare qualities. His candor surprised me. That's it. I'm an interesting specimen to study. He set down his glass with deliberate care. You're also a beautiful woman who looked at me without fear or calculation, at least initially. Do you know how rarely that happens in my position? Heat crept up my neck at his directness. I'm afraid of you now. Are you? He raised an eyebrow. Or are you afraid of your circumstances? The distinction felt important somehow. Before I could formulate a response, a discreet knock interrupted us. Come, Dante called. Luca entered, his expression grim. Sorry to interrupt, uncle. There's a situation that requires immediate attention. Dante stood immediately. What kind of situation? Castellano's men were spotted near Isabella's apartment building. They've been asking questions about her. Luca's eyes flicked to me briefly. They know she survived. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Dante's posture shifted subtly. The businessman replaced by something more dangerous. How many? For that we identified. Probably more watching. Put Roberto's team on surveillance. I want to know everyone who goes in or out of that building. Dante's voice remained calm, but his hands had clenched into fists. And double security here. No one enters the grounds without my explicit approval. Luca nodded, retreating from the study without another word. Dante remained motionless for several seconds, staring at the closed door with an expression that sent chills down my spine. Who's Castellano? I asked, breaking the heavy silence. He turned slowly, his face a careful mask once more. Someone who wants what I have, and that includes me now. The thought made my stomach turn. That includes you. He crossed to a cabinet, withdrawing a leather folder. Which brings us back to your decision. I need your answer, Isabella. Now, the choice wasn't really a choice at all. But I couldn't bring myself to say the words he wanted to hear. I need to talk to my sister first to explain why I've disappeared. Something softened in his expression. Of course, family is important. Can I see her? I asked, hope flaring briefly. Not yet. He held up a hand to forestall my protest. It's too dangerous while Castellano's men are watching. But you can call her from a secure line with certain precautions. It was less than I wanted, but more than I expected. He nodded, opening the folder to reveal what appeared to be a contract. Then you agreed to stay, at least temporarily. The document before me was written in legal language too complex to quickly understand, but the title was clear. Private Employment Agreement. What exactly does this commit me to? I asked, scanning the dense paragraphs. Standard terms of employment, confidentiality, loyalty, duties as my assistant. He pointed to several highlighted sections. Generous compensation, healthcare, security provisions, nothing inappropriate or illegal required of you. And if I want to leave eventually, there's a termination clause. His finger traced down to the final page. 3 months notice, relocation assistance, lifetime security consultation, all quite civilized. I looked up from the contract to find him watching me intently, his eyes revealing nothing of his thoughts. Why are you being so reasonable about this? You could just force me to stay. I could, he acknowledged. But willing loyalty is far more valuable than coerced submission. I want you to choose this, Isabella. The pen he offered felt heavier than it should. My hand trembled slightly as I reached for it, my mind racing through limited options. Stay and become entangled in a world of violence and power, or flee and abandon everything and everyone I loved. If I sign this, I said slowly, I want regular contact with my family and protection for them, too. He didn't hesitate. Anything else? I took a deep breath. I want your word that you won't ask me to do anything that violates my conscience. Something like respect flickered in his eyes. You have it. I never intended to corrupt you, Isabella. Your moral compass is precisely what makes you valuable. With a sense of sealing my fate, I signed the contract. Dante took the pen from my fingers, his hand lingering against mine for a moment too long to be accidental. Welcome to the family, Isabella. The way he said it sounded more like a claim than a greeting. As he signed beside my name, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just traded one prison for another. Only this one had gilded bars and a jailer whose intentions remained dangerously unclear. 2 weeks passed in a strange limbo of recovery and adjustment. My shoulder healed gradually, pain fading to a dull ache that flared only with sudden movements. Francesca helped me exercise the damaged muscles each morning, following the regimen prescribed by Dante's private doctor, who visited every 3rd day. My new role as personal assistant remained largely theoretical while I recovered. Though Dante began including me in certain aspects of his legitimate business, I learned that beneath the criminal enterprise lay a vast network of legal companies, real estate holdings, import-export businesses, technology investments, and hospitality ventures that span several continents. Most of what I do is perfectly legal, he explained one afternoon as we reviewed property acquisitions in his study. The other activities simply expedite processes that bureaucracy tends to complicate. I had carefully avoided asking direct questions about those other activities, maintaining a deliberate ignorance that Dante seemed to respect. He never discussed violence in my presence, though I occasionally caught fragments of conversations that fell silent when I entered rooms. My promised phone call to my sister happened my third day in the mansion under Dante's watchful eye. I fabricated a story about a job opportunity with a private client, technically true, if misleading, and promised to visit soon. The relief in Emma's voice had brought tears to my eyes, especially when she mentioned that someone had anonymously paid off our mother's medical bills. "It's like a miracle, Izzy," she'd said, excitement bubbling through the phone line. "Mom can finally get that surgery she's been putting off. The hospital said everything's covered. Past and future treatments." I'd glanced at Dante, who pretended absorption in his laptop screen while obviously listening to every word. The knowledge that he could grant such life-changing assistance with a single command was both comforting and terrifying. That evening marked my first dinner with Dante outside my room. He'd insisted I join him in the formal dining room, though he dismissed the staff after they served our meal. "You've been cooped up too long," he said, pouring wine into crystal glasses that caught the candlelight. "Besides, we should celebrate your recovery." "I'm hardly recovered," I replied, gesturing to the sling still supporting my arm. "But improving." His eyes softened in the dim light. "You're stronger than you know, Isabella." Throughout dinner, I found myself increasingly conscious of his gaze, the way it lingered when I spoke, how it traced the movement of my hand as I raised my wine glass. I'd noticed his attractiveness from the first moment in the restaurant, but proximity had only intensified its effect. The dangerous edge that surrounded him like an aura should have repelled me. Instead, I found myself drawn to the contradictions he embodied. Ruthless in business, yet surprisingly gentle with me, commanding with his subordinates, yet attentive to my comfort. "Tell me about your family," he said, as we finished our meal, settling back with a glass of amber liquor. "You rarely speak of them." The request seemed innocuous, but instinct told me to be cautious. "There's not much to tell. My sister is 19, studying nursing. My mother has lupus, which has gotten worse over the years. My father left when I was 12, and you became the provider." It wasn't a question. I nodded, uncomfortable with his perception. "Someone had to pay the bills. You sacrificed your own opportunities." Again, not a question. I did what was necessary. I studied his expression, trying to understand his interest. "Why do you want to know this?" He swirled his drink thoughtfully. "I'm trying to understand you. The woman who would step in front of a bullet for a stranger. I told you it was instinct. Born from years of protecting others." He leaned forward, eyes intent. "You've spent your life shielding people, haven't you? Your mother from financial ruin, your sister from missed opportunities, even your customers at the restaurant. I watched you for weeks before that night. The way you diffused situations, managed difficult patrons, protected the younger staff. My pulse quickened. You were watching me before the shooting." A faint smile touched his lips. "Cafe Milano has excellent risotto. I have a standing reservation every Tuesday." "I never noticed you before that night," I said, then winced at how that sounded. "You weren't meant to." His smile deepened, revealing a dimple in his right cheek I hadn't noticed before. "Though I noticed you immediately, the waitress who treated everyone with equal respect, regardless of their tab, who slipped extra bread to the old man who ordered only soup, who absorbed Carol's pettiness without complaint." Discomfort crept along my spine. "How often were you there?" "Often enough to know your extraordinary and ordinary circumstances." He set down his glass with careful precision. "Which makes me wonder how extraordinary you might be in extraordinary circumstances." Before I could respond to this unsettling observation, the dining room door opened. Luca entered, his expression tense. "Sorry to interrupt, Uncle." His eyes flickered briefly to me. "There's a situation that requires your attention." Dante's demeanor shifted instantly, warmth replaced by cool authority. "Excuse me, Isabella. Enjoy your dessert. I may be a while." After they left, I abandoned any pretense of eating, retreating to my room where I paced the plush carpet, my thoughts racing. Dante had been watching me long before the shooting. Had the drunk men been part of some elaborate test? No, his rage that night had been too genuine, his concern during my recovery too consistent. Sleep eluded me that night, my mind replaying every interaction with Dante, searching for hidden motives. Dawn found me exhausted but resolved. I needed more information about the man who now controlled my life. Over the following days, I began paying closer attention to the household rhythms. I noted which staff members seemed most approachable, which areas of the mansion saw the heaviest security, which times Dante was most likely to be occupied with business. Francesca proved a valuable, if reluctant, source of information. While helping me dress one morning, she mentioned that she'd worked for the Moretti family for 15 years. You must know Dante well, I ventured, keeping my tone casual. Her hands paused briefly at my shoulder. Moretti is a private man, but fair, I pressed. As an employer, she resumed her task, securing the sling with practiced movements. More than fair, when my husband became ill 3 years ago, Mr. Moretti arranged specialists from Europe, paid for experimental treatments not covered by insurance. Gabriella is alive because of him. The genuine gratitude in her voice wasn't what I expected. He takes care of his people. Loyalty flows both ways in this house, she said, meeting my eyes in the mirror. Remember that, Miss Isabella. The warning or advice lingered as I made my way to Dante's study for what had become our morning routine. He would review overnight reports while I organized his correspondence and schedule, learning the complex web of his business interests. I found him standing at the window, phone pressed to his ear, tension evident in the set of his shoulders. He acknowledged my entrance with a slight nod, but continued his conversation in rapid Italian. Though I couldn't understand the words, the cold anger in his tone required no translation. When he finally ended the call, he remained silent for several moments, staring out at the garden. Is everything all right? I asked, setting my tablet on his desk. Castellano's men made another attempt to access your apartment yesterday. His voice was eerily calm. They were dissuaded by my security team. A chill ran through me. He turned, his expression carefully neutral. It means the situation is escalating. Castellano senses weakness. Because of me. The realization settled like lead in my stomach. Not because of you, he corrected sharply. Because of what you represent. Which is what exactly? He approached slowly, stopping close enough that I had to tilt my head to maintain eye contact. A change in pattern. For years, I've maintained certain boundaries. No attachments outside the family. No vulnerabilities that could be exploited. I'm not an attachment, I protested. I'm your employee. We both know you're more than that, Isabella. My heart stuttered at his directness. I don't understand what you want from me. Neither do I. The admission seemed to cost him something, which is precisely the problem. Before I could respond, Luca appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. They found Roberto. Dante's entire demeanor transformed, a cold mask sliding into place. Abandoned warehouse near the river. He's alive, but barely. They're bringing him in now. Prepare the medical wing. Dante grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair and called Dr. Benedetti. Tell him to bring everything. This wasn't a random attack. As he moved toward the door, he paused beside me. Stay in your room until I come for you. Lock the door. Open it only for Francesca or myself. What's happening? I asked, fear closing my throat. His hand brushed my cheek briefly. Nothing you need to concern yourself with. Just stay safe. After he left, I returned to my room as instructed, but anxiety made confinement unbearable. Hours passed with no word. Twice I heard hurried footsteps in the corridor, urgent voices speaking in Italian. When Francesca brought lunch, her usual warmth was replaced with distracted efficiency. Is Roberto all right? I asked as she turned to leave. She paused, conflict evident in her expression. The doctors are with him. Why would someone hurt him? Francesca glanced at the door, then lowered her voice. He was watching your apartment building. One of Mr. Moretti's most trusted security men. The implication hit like a physical blow. Someone hurt him because of me. Not because of you. She echoed Dante's earlier words. Because of his loyalty to Mr. after she left, guilt and fear warred within me. A man was fighting for his life because he'd been protecting me, or rather protecting Dante's interest in me. The artificial bubble I'd been living in for 2 weeks suddenly felt dangerously thin. Night fell with still no word from Dante. I dozed fitfully in a chair by the window, startling awake at every distant sound. Near midnight, My door opened without a knock. Dante stood in the threshold, his appearance shocking after the polished businessman I'd grown accustomed to. His shirt was wrinkled, sleeves rolled to reveal forearms smudged with what looked disturbingly like dried blood. His jaw darkened with stubble, and his eyes held a coldness that made me shrink back involuntarily. "You should be sleeping," he said, his voice rough with exhaustion. "Is Roberto alive?" I asked, rising from the chair. Something shifted in his expression. "Yes, he'll recover eventually." Relief flooded me, followed immediately by fresh fear at the implications of eventually. "What happened to him?" Dante closed the door, moving to pour himself a drink from the crystal decanter kept on my sideboard. "Nothing you need to know about." "I think I do need to know," I insisted. Courage born of fatigue and frustration. "If people are being tortured because of me, he interrupted sharply. "Make no mistake, Isabella. Roberto was targeted because he works for me. You are simply the excuse Castellano needed to escalate a conflict that's been brewing for years." "Then let me go?" The words escaped before I could consider their wisdom. "If I'm making things worse," in 2 quick strides, he closed the distance between us, his hands grasping my upper arms with carefully restrained strength. "Let you go now when Castellano has proven he'll target anyone connected to me." His laugh held no humor. "He would have you within hours, and he would use you in ways that would make Roberto's injuries look merciful." Fear closed my throat, not of Dante, but of the faceless Castellano and what he represented. "What does he want?" Dante's grip gentled, one hand moving to brush hair from my face with incongruous tenderness. "What all men like him want: power, territory, respect." His thumb traced my cheekbone. "Me broken or dead." The intimacy of the gesture contrasted sharply with his words, leaving me disoriented. "And what do you want?" Something shifted in his gaze, hardness giving way to an emotion I couldn't identify. "Right now, to keep you safe. To end Castellano before he hurts anyone else under my protection." His hand slid to cut my neck, warm and possessive, and to understand why. After years of perfect control, I find myself making decisions based on a waitress who looked at me without fear. The raw honesty in his voice stripped away my defenses. "I'm afraid now." His eyes searched mine. "You're cautious, concerned, but not afraid." "Not of me. That's the problem, Isabella. You should be." Morning light filtered through the curtains when I woke, momentarily disoriented. Memories of the previous night's conversation with Dante flooded back. His blood-stained appearance, the intensity in his eyes when he'd told me I should fear him. Yet, he'd left shortly after, instructing me to rest, his touch lingering on my face like a promise or a warning. The mansion hummed with unusual activity when I ventured out. Security personnel I hadn't seen before patrolled the hallways, speaking in hushed tones into discreet earpieces. In the kitchen, staff worked with nervous efficiency, barely acknowledging my presence as I helped myself to coffee. "Moretti requests your presence in his office," said a voice behind me, startling me into nearly spilling my drink. I turned to find Luca watching me with that same assessing gaze he always used somewhere between suspicion and curiosity. Unlike his uncle, Luca made no effort to disguise his dangerous nature. The gun holstered beneath his tailored jacket was clearly visible as he gestured for me to follow him. "Is everything all right?" I asked as we walked the long corridor toward Dante's wing of the house. Luca's sideways glance revealed nothing. "My uncle will explain." Dante's office differed from his study. Less comfortable, more functional. Maps covered one wall, computer screens another. When we entered, he was standing at a large table with several men I recognized from previous introductions, all bent over what appeared to be blueprints. He looked up, and I was struck by the transformation from last night. Gone was the disheveled, blood-stained man with haunted eyes. This Dante wore an impeccably tailored suit, his hair perfectly styled, his expression controlled and commanding. Only the faint shadows beneath his eyes hinted at a sleepless night. "Isabella," he acknowledged, straightening. "Thank you for coming." The other men stepped back, exchanging glances I couldn't interpret. One by one, they filed out at Dante's slight nod until only Luca remained. "What's happening?" I asked, unable to contain my unease any longer. Dante's expression softened fractionally. "Circumstances have changed. We need to move you to a more secure location temporarily." "Move me." Panic fluttered in my chest. "Where for how long?" My estate in Lake Co., he replied, his tone suggesting this should reassure me. It's remote, heavily secured, and unknown to most outside my immediate circle. It whispered, the reality of my situation crashing down like a physical weight. I can't go to Italy. My family will be protected, he cut in smoothly. I've already arranged for your mother and sister to be relocated to a private medical facility in Arizona. They believe it's part of an expanded healthcare program through your mother's insurance. The casual way he spoke of manipulating my family's lives sent anger surging through me. You had no right to make these decisions without consulting me. I had every right, he countered, voice hardening. Your contract gives me full authority over security measures affecting you and your family. And after what happened to Roberto, timing became critical. Luca shifted uncomfortably, drawing my attention. What aren't you telling me? Dante and his nephew exchanged a look laden with unspoken communication. After a moment, Dante nodded. Castellano's men left a message with Roberto. Luca explained, his voice clinical. Photos of your sister on campus. Your mother outside her doctor's office. They know exactly who matters to you. The room tilted sickeningly. They're going to hurt my family to get to me. Dante corrected, moving around the table to stand before me. You are my perceived weakness. By threatening you and those you love, Castellano believes he can control me. Can he? The question escaped before I could reconsider. Something dangerous flashed in Dante's eyes. He certainly thinks so. The implication hung between us. Heavy with meaning I wasn't sure I wanted to understand. Luca cleared his throat. The jet is ready whenever you are, Uncle. Security is in position at both locations. Dante nodded. Give us a moment. After Luca left, silence stretched between us. I hugged my arms across my chest, suddenly cold despite the room's comfortable temperature. How long will we be gone? I finally asked, resignation coloring my voice. Until it's safe to return, he replied, which wasn't an answer at all. And when will that be? His expression hardened when Castellano is no longer a threat. The clinical way he referenced eliminating another human being should have horrified me. Instead, I found myself wondering what it said about my own morality that I felt only relief at the implied violence. I need to pack, I said, avoiding the ethical quagmire our conversation threatened to become. Francesca has prepared everything you'll need. He stepped closer, his voice softening. I understand this is difficult, Isabella. But I promise you, your family will be safe. You will be safe. But you won't be, I said, the realization dawning as I studied his face. You're sending me away while you deal with Castellano. I'm sending you away because your presence clouds my judgment, and I need perfect clarity for what comes next. Before I could respond, he reached for my hand, his touch surprisingly gentle as he placed a small object in my palm. I looked down to find a delicate gold ring with a small ruby set in an antique filigree setting. What is this? I asked, confused by the seemingly random gift. Protection, he replied. Everyone in my inner circle wears a symbol of their connection to me. It identifies you as untouchable to those who understand the significance. I stared at the ring, understanding dawning. This marks me as your possession. As under my protection, he corrected, though his eyes told a different story. Were it always, especially in Italy. The weight of the ring felt disproportionate to its physical size as I slipped it onto my right hand. It fit perfectly, of course. Dante left nothing to chance. The car is waiting, he said, stepping back. Luca will accompany you to the airfield. You're not coming. I hadn't expected the sharp disappointment that accompanied the question. I'll join you in a few days, he replied, his expression carefully neutral. Business requires my presence here a little longer. The business of eliminating Castellano. I understood without him saying it explicitly. I nodded, suddenly unsure what to say and what could be our final moments if things went wrong. Dante solved the dilemma by closing the distance between us, his hand rising to cup my face with that now familiar possessive gentleness. Be safe, Isabella. Trust no one but Luca and the staff you recognize from here. Before I could respond, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to my forehead. A benediction and a claiming all at once. The gesture left me breathless, confused by the conflicting emotions it triggered. I'll see you in Como, he murmured against my skin, then stepped back, his professional mask sliding seamlessly back into place. Luca appeared at the door as if summoned telepathically. And just like that, I was whisked away from Chicago, from my family, from everything familiar into a world where I existed solely as an extension of Dante Moretti's will. The journey passed in a blur of private terminals, luxury transportation, and differential staff who never quite met my eyes. Luca remained a constant silent shadow, his vigilance never wavering, even on the private jet where we were alone, except for the crew. It was only as we approached the Italian estate, a spectacular villa perched above Lake Cao's crystalline waters, that Luca finally spoke more than essential directions. "He's never brought anyone here," he said, watching my reaction as the car wound up the Cypress Line drive. "Not in the 5 years since he acquired it." I turned from the window to study his face. "Why are you telling me this?" Luca's expression remained carefully neutral. "Because you should understand the position you occupy in his life, for better or worse." "Which do you think it is?" I asked, genuinely curious about his assessment. A ghost of a smile touched his lips, so reminiscent of his uncle that it startled me. "That depends entirely on what happens next." The villa proved even more spectacular inside than out. A seamless blend of historic architecture and modern luxury. A small staff greeted us, all speaking English for my benefit, all wearing small indicators of their allegiance to Dante. Pins, rings, or pendants similar to but distinct from mine. Francesca appeared from within, her familiar face a welcome sight amidst so much strangeness. "Miss Isabella, welcome. I'll show you to your rooms." The suite prepared for me overlooked the lake with a private terrace and sumptuous furnishings that somehow perfectly matched my taste, despite never having discussed such preferences. My clothes, a mix of familiar items from my apartment and new pieces in the same style, had been unpacked and arranged in a walk-in closet larger than my entire bedroom in Chicago. "There's a phone on the nightstand," Francesca explained as she showed me around. "It connects only to the house and to Mr. Moretti's secure line. For your safety, please don't try to use any other communication devices while you're here." The gentle reminder of my gilded cage didn't escape me. "How long has Dante owned this place?" 5 years, she replied, confirming Luca's earlier comment. "He comes here when he needs solitude. Very few people know of its existence. Yet he sent me here," I mused, more to myself than to her. Francesca's expression softened with something like sympathy. "Mr. Moretti protects what he values, Miss Isabella, sometimes at great personal cost." The days passed in strange isolation. The estate grounds were extensive but thoroughly secured, allowing me limited freedom to explore gardens and shoreline paths under the watchful eyes of security personnel who materialized whenever I ventured outdoors. Books, films, and art supplies appeared in my rooms. Thoughtful distractions I recognized as Dante's doing. Each evening, the phone would ring precisely at 8 o'clock. Dante's voice thousands of miles away would inquire about my day, my comfort, my needs, everything except what I truly wanted to know. When would this exile end? On the 4th night, the pattern changed. No call came at 8. By 10, anxiety had me pacing the terrace, imagination conjuring increasingly terrible scenarios involving Castellano and Dante's fate. Just after midnight, as I finally prepared for bed with resignation, a commotion outside drew me to the window. Headlights swept the driveway as several vehicles approached. Security personnel materialized from the darkness. Positions alert but not alarmed, suggesting expected arrivals rather than threats. I slipped on a robe over my nightgown and ventured into the hallway, drawn by voices speaking rapid Italian downstairs. Francesca appeared from her quarters, hair disheveled from sleep. "Return to your room, Miss Isabella," she urged, her expression tense. "Please, is it Dante?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Before she could respond, the front door opened below, and I leaned over the balustrade to see Dante himself enter, flanked by Luca and 2 security men I recognized from Chicago. Even from above, I could see the weariness in his posture, the careful way he held himself, suggesting injury or pain. He looked up as though sensing my presence, our eyes meeting across the distance. Something in his expression shifted, hardness giving way to something softer, more vulnerable. Without a word to his companions, he moved toward the stairs. Francesca discreetly disappeared as Dante reached the landing, leaving us alone in the dimly lit hallway. Up close, the evidence of what he'd been doing was unmistakable. A healing cut across his cheekbone, bruising at his temple, knuckles raw and scabbed. He'd changed from his usual impeccable suits to dark clothing that concealed whatever other injuries he might carry. "You should be sleeping," he said, echoing his words from nights ago in Chicago. "Is it over?" I asked, ignoring his gentle rebuke. Yes, that single syllable contained multitudes. Finality, victory, cost. I didn't ask for details, uncertain whether my reluctance stemmed from moral qualms or self-preservation. "Were you hurt?" I reached toward the cut on his face, stopping just short of touching him. "Nothing serious." He captured my hand, his thumb brushing over the ruby ring he'd given me. "You're still wearing it. You told me to." I reminded him. "And do you always do as you're told, Isabella?" "Rarely," I admitted. "But this seemed important to you." "It was." His voice softened as he tugged gently on my hand, drawing me closer. "It means more than you know to see it on your finger." We stood in silence, the weight of unspoken words hanging between us. So much had changed in the weeks since that night at Cafe Milano. I had changed. My understanding of the world and my place in it transformed by proximity to this dangerous, complicated man. "What happens now?" I finally asked, the question encompassing far more than our immediate future. Dante's free hand rose to cut my face, thumb tracing my cheekbone in that now familiar gesture. "Now we have choices, Isabella. Real ones, not forced by circumstance or threat." "What choices?" I whispered, pulse quickening under his touch. "You can return to Chicago to a life not unlike your old one, but with my protection, ensuring your comfort and safety from a distance." His eyes held mine, searching. "Or you can stay with me, not as my employee or my ward, but as something more." The offer hung between us, tempting and terrifying in equal measure. "And if I choose to go back, then I'll respect your decision." The words clearly cost him, belied by the tightening of his fingers against mine. "Though I would hope you might permit me to visit occasionally." "And if I stay?" I asked, already knowing my decision, but needing to understand what it meant. Instead of answering with words, he closed the remaining distance between us. His lips found mine with gentle pressure that quickly gave way to something more demanding. As my response encouraged him, the kiss deepened, his arms drawing me against him with careful attention to his injuries, yet unmistakable possession. When we finally parted, both breathless, he pressed his forehead to mine. "If you stay, you accept all of me, Isabella, the businessman and the monster. I won't pretend to be something I'm not." "I don't want pretense," I whispered, fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "I want truth between us, even when it's difficult." His smile transformed his face, years falling away as relief, and something dangerously close to joy replaced the guarded control I'd grown accustomed to. "Then stay. Choose me, knowing exactly who and what I am." In that moment, standing in the hushed hallway of a villa overlooking moonlit waters, I made my choice, not from fear or obligation, but from the recognition of something rare and precious forming between us, a connection forged in violence and danger, yet evolving into something that might, with care and honesty, become love. "I choose you," I said simply. "All of you." His arms tightened around me, the embrace of a man who had faced death and returned victorious to claim what he considered his. As his lips found mine once more, I understood that in saving Dante Moretti that night in the restaurant, I had not lost my freedom. I had found a different kind, one where protection and possession, danger and devotion, existed in perfect, complicated balance. The bullet that had brought us together had changed everything, marking the end of one life and the beginning of another. Not as victim and savior, nor captor and captive, but as equals joined by choice and circumstance. A waitress and a mafia boss finding in each other the missing pieces neither knew they sought until fate intervened with gunpowder and violence. The morning sun painted Lake Como in shades of gold and azure, its surface mirror-smooth except for the occasional ripple from a distant boat. I stood on my terrace, coffee cup warming my hands, watching Dante's reflection in the water as he swam laps in the infinity pool below. His strokes were powerful and methodical, another form of the discipline that governed every aspect of his existence. 3 weeks had passed since that night in the hallway. 3 weeks of careful navigation through the complexities of our new arrangement. The villa staff had accepted my presence with professional courtesy, tinged by genuine warmth. Francesca continued to serve as both attendant and confidant, her morning reports on household matters evolving into discussions about Italian customs and family traditions. The gardener, an elderly man named Giuseppe, had taken to leaving fresh flowers outside my door with handwritten notes in broken English describing their meanings. Even the security personnel, initially distant and suspicious, now greeted me with respectful nods. Yet for all this acceptance, I remained acutely aware of being a fish in a very elegant aquarium. The villa's beauty couldn't disguise its fundamental nature as a fortress. Motion sensors hidden among the cypress trees, cameras disguised as decorative elements, armed guards who materialized from shadows whenever I ventured beyond the immediate grounds. My freedom was real but circumscribed, a gift that could be revoked at any moment. Dante emerged from the pool, water streaming from his athletic frame as he reached for a towel. Even at this distance, I could see the network of scars across his torso, some old and silvered, others still pink with recent healing. Battle marks from a life I was only beginning to understand. He looked up as if sensing my observation, raising a hand in greeting before disappearing into the pool house. My phone buzzed against the stone balustrade where I'd placed it. Emma's face appeared on the secure video call, her expression bright with excitement despite the early hour in Arizona. "Izzy, you should see Mom today. The doctors say her inflammation markers are the lowest they've been in years. She's actually talking about maybe taking that painting class she's always wanted to try." Emma's words tumbled out in a rush, her joy infectious despite the guilt gnawing at my chest. "The medication they've put her on, it's like a miracle. We can't thank whoever arranged this enough." I forced a smile, the weight of my deception settling heavier with each passing day. "How are your classes going? Anything interesting in clinical rotations?" "Oh my God, yes. We're doing trauma surgery observations this week, and yesterday I watched this surgeon save a man who came in with 3 gunshot wounds. The precision, the teamwork, it was incredible." She paused, her expression shifting slightly. "Izzy, are you okay? You look tired." "Just adjusting to the new job. Different time zones, you know." I kept my voice light, hating how easily the lies came now. "My client keeps unusual hours." "Right, the private consulting thing. Mom's still confused about what exactly you're doing for some European businessman, but the money's real enough." Emma's face moved closer to the camera. "Seriously though, are you safe? This whole situation seems kind of intense." Before I could formulate a response that wasn't entirely fabricated, Dante appeared in my peripheral vision, approaching the terrace with a breakfast tray. His hair was still damp from his swim, casual clothes doing nothing to diminish the aura of controlled power that surrounded him like cologne. "Emma, I need to go. Client meeting. Give Mom my love, okay?" "Will do. Love you too, sis. Be careful." The call ended, leaving me staring at the blank screen while Dante set the tray on the small table between the terrace chairs. Fresh fruit, pastries that smelled of butter and vanilla, coffee that probably cost more per cup than I used to make in tips. "Family conversations always leave you looking like you've witnessed a tragedy," he observed, settling into the chair across from me. His tone was gentle, but I caught the underlying question. It's hard to lie to people you love. I picked at a croissant, appetite fleeing in the face of my guilt. Every day I talked to Emma, every update about Mom's health, and I'm sitting here in paradise built on blood money. Dante's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his amber eyes. "My money comes from many sources, Isabella. Some cleaner than others. Your family benefits from legitimate investments, property holdings, technology ventures. Does it matter if the same hands that signed their medical authorizations have also signed death warrants?" The casual way he acknowledged both sides of his nature should have frightened me. Instead, I found myself oddly comforted by his honesty. At least he wasn't pretending to be something he wasn't. "Yes, it matters. It all matters. But I'm starting to understand that the world isn't divided into good people and Death Eaters." He smiled at the reference, recognizing it despite himself. "Harry Potter. I wouldn't have expected you to quote children's literature during a moral crisis. My sister made me read them during her fantasy phase. Sometimes wisdom comes from unexpected places." I met his gaze directly. "Tell me something true about your business, Dante. Something that would help me understand how to live with this choice I've made." He was quiet for so long I thought he might refuse. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that suggested these weren't words he'd shared often. 3 months ago, A rival family decided to expand into Chicago by targeting my legitimate operations. They burned down a community center I'd helped fund, a place that provided after-school programs for kids in Southside neighborhoods. 12 children were inside when the fire started. My breath caught. Were they? All survived. My security team got them out before the fire department even arrived. But those children went to bed every night for weeks afterward, afraid their safe place might disappear again. He leaned forward, intensity radiating from every line of his body. So I eliminated the men responsible. Not their organizations, not their territories, just the specific individuals who thought terrorizing children was an acceptable business tactic. The stark simplicity of his justice chilled and fascinated me in equal measure. You killed them. I ended a threat to innocent lives. The distinction matters, at least to me. His fingers found mine across the small table. This is who I am, Isabella. I protect what's mine, provide for my people, and remove obstacles that threaten both. The methods vary depending on the obstacle. We sat in silence, his thumb tracing patterns across my knuckles while I processed what he'd shared. The morning breeze carried the scent of jasmine from the gardens below, birds calling to each other in liquid Italian that somehow seemed appropriate for this place, suspended between beauty and danger. Your turn, he said finally. Tell me something true about yourself that I don't already know. I watched a seaplane cross the distant horizon before answering. When I was 16, I stole money from my mother's purse to buy Emma school supplies. Not much, just $20, but it was money she'd scraped together for her lupus medication. Emma never knew, and Mom never said anything, but I saw her counting and recounting her pills that month, trying to stretch them an extra week. Why tell me this? Because you need to understand that I'm not the selfless saint you think I am. I've been protecting and providing for my family long before you came along, and I've made choices that hurt people I love. The guilt from that $20 taught me more about survival than any philosophy class ever could. Dante lifted my hand to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to my palm. This is why you intrigue me. You understand necessity without losing your conscience. It's a rare combination. The sound of approaching footsteps interrupted us. Luca emerged onto the terrace, his expression carefully neutral but tension evident in the set of his shoulders. Uncle, I apologize for the interruption. We've received word from Chicago. Dante's posture shifted instantly. The relaxed man I'd been talking with replaced by the calculating predator who'd faced down armed men in a restaurant. Is it handled? The immediate threat, yes. But there are complications. Luca's eyes flicked to me briefly. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. No. Dante's voice carried the finality of a judge pronouncing sentence. Isabella is part of this now. She deserves to know what shadows she's chosen to live with. Castellano's lieutenants have been eliminated, Luca reported, his tone clinical. But the federal investigation into his operations has expanded. They're looking at anyone who had contact with his organization in the past 6 months. Your name has come up. I felt the blood drain from my face. Mine too. You were in the restaurant. You were injured in the crossfire. To outside observers, you're a victim who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Luca's expression softened slightly. Your identity remains secure. But Dante's doesn't. The realization hit like a physical blow. They're investigating you because of what happened to Castellano. Federal investigations are like weather patterns, Dante said, his calm at odds with the churning in my stomach. They build, they rage, they dissipate. The key is having enough shelter to weather the storm and enough patience to outlast it. Luca cleared his throat. There's more. Giovanni believes someone within our organization fed information to the feds about the Castellano operation. We have a leak. The temperature on the terrace seemed to drop despite the warm morning sun. Dante's expression went blank, the kind of emptiness that preceded violence. How certain is Giovanni? Certain enough to recommend immediate security protocol changes. No one enters or leaves any of our properties without direct authorization from you or me. All communications go through encrypted channels only. And he recommends bringing Isabella back to Chicago for enhanced protection. No. Dante's response was immediate and non-negotiable. She stays here where I know every variable, every person, every potential threat. Chicago is compromised until we identify the source of the leak. I'm sitting right here, I interrupted, anger flaring at being discussed like a piece of furniture. Don't I get a say in decisions about my own safety? Both men turned to me with identical expressions of protective male obstinacy, and for a moment the family resemblance between uncle and nephew was unmistakable. Your safety isn't up for debate, Dante said simply. It's my responsibility now. No, it's mine. I stood, the chair scraping against stone with enough force to send nearby birds into flight. I chose to be here, chose to accept your protection, chose to enter this world. But that doesn't make me your possession or your prisoner. Isabella. His voice carried a warning that would have silenced most people. Don't Isabella me like I'm a child having a tantrum. I moved to the balustrade, needing distance and the illusion of escape that the open sky provided. You want honesty between us. Here's some truth for you. I'm terrified every moment of every day. Terrified that I've made the wrong choice. Terrified that my family will discover what I've become. Terrified that you'll decide I'm more liability than asset and eliminate me like you did Castellano. The silence stretched between us, broken only by the distant sound of waves against the villa's private dock. When Dante spoke, his voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. Come here. I don't want to. Isabella, please. The request, so different from his usual commands, undid my defiance. I turned to find him standing with one hand extended, palm up, waiting. Luca had diplomatically retreated to the far end of the terrace, studying his phone with elaborate concentration. When I placed my hand in Dante's, he drew me close enough that I could see the gold flecks in his eyes, could feel the warmth radiating from his body despite the careful control of his expression. I have killed 23 people, he said quietly. Some quickly, some not. Some who deserved it, some who simply stood in the way of something I needed. But I have never, not once, harmed someone under my protection. You are safer with me than you have ever been in your life, whether you believe that or not. The certainty in his voice, the absolute conviction, should have reassured me. Instead, it highlighted exactly how far I'd traveled from the world where right and wrong had clear boundaries. What if I want to leave? The question slipped out before I could stop it. What if I decide this is too much and I want to go back to being nobody's special waiting tables in Chicago? Something painful flickered across his features. Then you leave. I'll ensure you have a new identity, financial security, protection from a distance. Your family will continue to receive medical care and educational support through untraceable channels. And I'll try very hard not to follow you. The last part was said with such raw honesty that it took my breath away. You'd let me go? I'd hate every second of it. I'd probably have you watched by security teams you'd never detect, just to make sure you were safe. I'd find excuses to be in whatever city you chose, just to catch glimpses of you living the life you preferred. But yes, Isabella, I'd let you go. We stood there in the morning sunlight, the weight of possibilities hanging between us like morning mist over the lake. Luca continued his performance of intense phone scrutiny, but I caught him glancing our way with an expression that suggested he was following every word despite the careful distance. I don't want to leave, I admitted finally. I'm scared and confused and probably making the worst decision of my life, but I don't want to leave. Relief flooded Dante's features, quickly masked but unmistakable. Then we'll figure out how to make this work. All of it. The investigations, the security threats, your family, your conscience. We'll find a way. Luca approached cautiously. Uncle, Giovanni is waiting for your response about the security protocols. Implement everything except the Chicago relocation. Dante's grip on my hand tightened slightly. Isabella stays here until the situation stabilizes. And Luca, I want daily reports on the federal investigation. If they get close to connecting our operations to Isabella, we'll need to move quickly. Understood. Luca nodded to me with something approaching respect. Miss Isabella, the security briefing for household staff is this afternoon. Francesca will bring you up to speed on the new protocols. After he left, Dante and I remained on the terrace, the breakfast growing cold between us while we navigated the new reality of our situation. The fairy tale interlude was over. Whatever came next would require choosing sides in a world where neutrality was a luxury neither of us could afford. That afternoon, the villa transformed from elegant retreat to military installation. Staff members I'd never seen before appeared with equipment that looked suspiciously high-tech for a private residence. Gardens were swept for surveillance devices. Phone lines were replaced with encrypted systems. Motion detectors and cameras multiplied like digital flowers throughout the grounds. Francesca found me in the library, trying to lose myself in a novel while the controlled chaos swirled around us. Miss Isabella, we need to discuss the new communication procedures. For the next hour, she walked me through protocols that seemed lifted from a spy thriller. Secure phones with rotating encryption keys. Code words for different types of emergencies. Procedures for everything from suspicious visitors to actual attacks. The elegant normalcy of villa life dissolved under the weight of necessary paranoia. How do you stand it? I asked when she finished. Living with this constant awareness of threat. You adapt, she said simply. Fear becomes background noise, like traffic outside your window. Eventually, you notice its absence more than its presence. Have there been attacks before? Once. 3 years ago. She moved to the window, gazing out at the lake with eyes that had seen too much. Men came at night, thinking Mr. Moretti was alone here. They were wrong about that. They were wrong about many things. What happened to them? They discovered that some mistakes are fatal. Her tone carried the finality of a closing door. The villa was redecorated afterward. Fresh paint covers many sins. That evening, Dante found me on the terrace where I'd taken to watching the sun set over the lake, trying to process the day's revelations. He'd changed into dark jeans and a black sweater that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders and made his eyes seem almost luminous in the fading light. Overwhelming day, he observed, settling into the chair beside mine. Enlightening would be more accurate. I kept my gaze on the water, where the last rays of sunlight turned the surface into molten copper. Your staff is very loyal. They're family, not by blood, most of them, but by choice and circumstance. In my world, that loyalty is often the only thing standing between survival and annihilation. Is that what I am now? Family by choice and circumstance. He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. When he spoke, his voice carried depths I was only beginning to explore. You're something new. Something I don't have words for yet. The honesty in his admission stirred something dangerous in my chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the evening air. We sat in comfortable silence as darkness claimed the lake, stars emerging one by one in the clear Italian sky. Dante, I said finally, that first night at the restaurant, when you looked at me after I gave you the wine, what did you see? A woman who looked at me like I was human instead of a transaction waiting to happen. His fingers found mine in the darkness. It had been so long since someone saw me instead of my reputation that I'd forgotten what it felt like. And now I see someone brave enough to build a life from pieces she never expected to find. He raised our joined hands to his lips, pressing a kiss to my knuckles. Now I see home. The word hung between us, loaded with implications neither of us was quite ready to fully examine. But for the first time since that night in the restaurant, the future felt like something worth protecting instead of simply surviving. 2 days later, the careful peace we'd constructed shattered like glass against stone. I woke to find Francesca shaking my shoulder, her face pale in the pre-dawn darkness. Miss Isabella, you need to get dressed. Quickly. What's wrong? I struggled to focus, sleep still clinging to my consciousness like spider webs. Federal agents at the main gate. They have warrants. She was already pulling clothes from my wardrobe, her movements sharp with controlled panic. Mr. Moretti wants you in the safe room until this is resolved. Safe room. The words penetrated my drowsiness like ice water. How do federal agents find a place that's supposed to be secret? Someone told them. Her mouth compressed into a thin line. The leak Uncle Luca mentioned. It's worse than we thought. I dressed with fumbling fingers, mind racing through possibilities none of which ended well. Through my window, I could see lights moving up the long driveway. Official vehicles that belonged to a world where Dante Moretti was a criminal instead of the complex man who brought me coffee and worried about my nightmares. Francesca led me through corridors I'd never seen before, hidden passages behind false walls that spoke of paranoia elevated to art form. The safe room, when we reached it, looked like a luxury bunker. Comfortable furniture, communication equipment, enough supplies to withstand a siege. Dante was already there, dressed in a perfectly pressed suit despite the early hour. His expression was calm, but I caught the tension in the way he held his shoulders, the careful control that meant he was suppressing violent impulses. How bad is it? I asked, accepting the coffee Luca handed me with shaking hands. Bad enough. Dante's voice was clipped, professional. They have enough evidence to justify search warrants for all my properties. Someone provided them with detailed information about my business operations. Which means someone close to you betrayed you. Someone close to us, he corrected, his gaze sharp enough to cut glass. The leak knew about you, about this place, about operations that only my inner circle should have access to. Luca looked up from the bank of monitors, showing various views of the villa grounds. Uncle, they're setting up a command center at the main gate. This isn't a quick search and seizure. They're planning to be here for days. Let them. Dante's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. They'll find nothing more incriminating than expensive wine and questionable art. This villa is completely legitimate, purchased through documented channels with clean money. What about the safe room? I gestured around us at the obviously non-standard architecture. Rich men have panic rooms. It's not illegal to be prepared for home invasions. He moved to the monitors, watching as federal agents swarmed his property with the efficiency of an invading army. Though they might wonder why mine is equipped with enough communication gear to run a small government. The morning passed in surreal suspension. We watched through hidden cameras as agents methodically searched every room, every closet, every drawer. They were thorough but respectful, documenting everything but destroying nothing. Professional courtesy extended even to criminal investigations, apparently. Francesca appeared on one monitor, calmly serving coffee to agents in the kitchen while they worked. Her performance of concerned household staff was flawless, complete with worried questions about when Mr. Moretti would return from his business trip in Rome. Brilliant, Luca murmured, watching his colleague's Academy Award-worthy portrayal. She's giving them exactly the story we need them to believe. By noon, it became clear the agents weren't finding what they'd hoped for. Radio chatter intercepted by Dante's equipment revealed frustration and growing suspicion that they'd been fed false information. Sir, one voice crackled through the speakers. We're not finding anything here that supports the intelligence report. Either our information was wrong, or this place has been cleaned. Keep searching, came the reply. Someone risked a lot to give us this location. There has to be something here. Dante's expression grew thoughtful. They're not just fishing. Someone specifically pointed them here with promises of evidence. This wasn't a general investigation expanding to include me. This was targeted. Which brings us back to the question of who wants you burned badly enough to involve federal law enforcement. Luca pulled up files on a tablet, scrolling through lists of names and photographs. Giovanni's been investigating, but so far everyone's alibis check out. Not everyone. Dante's voice had gone very quiet, the kind of quiet that preceded explosions. Someone with access to information about Isabella's presence here. Someone who knew about the timing of our arrival, about the security protocols, about operations they shouldn't have been briefed on. The implication hung in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. Someone in the inner circle. Someone trusted enough to have access to everything. Someone close enough to know secrets that could destroy lives. Uncle, Luca's voice was carefully controlled. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that betrayal always comes from those closest to the target. Dante turned from the monitors, his expression hard as winter stone. I'm thinking we need to have some very direct conversations with some very trusted people. The federal agents departed near sunset, their search yielding nothing more incriminating than expensive taste and a preference for privacy. But their presence had changed everything. The villa no longer felt like sanctuary. It felt like a target waiting for the next attack. That night, alone in my room while Dante conducted what he euphemistically called staff interviews, I stared out at Lake Como's deceptively peaceful surface and wondered how many more revelations my conscience could absorb before it simply shut down completely. The woman who'd served coffee to businessmen and worried about rent money felt like someone I'd known in another lifetime. Tomorrow would bring answers, Dante had promised. Someone would pay for the betrayal, justice would be swift and permanent, and security would be restored. But tonight, suspended between the person I'd been and whoever I was becoming, I could only watch the water and hope that when the reckoning came, there would still be enough of my humanity left to recognize myself in the aftermath. The knock at my door came just after midnight, soft enough that I almost missed it beneath the sound of rain against the windows. I found Dante in the hallway, still dressed but disheveled in a way I'd never seen before. His usually perfect hair was mussed, his tie loosened, and something in his expression made my chest tight with concern. We found our leak, he said without preamble. "You're not going to like this." I stepped aside to let him enter, noting the careful way he moved, as though something inside him had been broken and was being held together by will alone. Who was it? Giovanni. The name emerged like a confession of faith lost. 15 years of loyalty, of shared risks, of family dinners and holiday celebrations. He sold us out for immunity from prosecution on tax evasion charges that would have meant maybe 18 months in minimum security prison. The magnitude of the betrayal hit like a physical blow. I sank onto the edge of my bed, mind struggling to process the scope of what this meant. He knew everything. Every operation, every safe house, every person under your protection. Everything, Dante confirmed, moving to the window where he stood with his back to me, shoulders rigid with suppressed emotion, including details about you that I shared in confidence. Your real name, your family's location, the circumstances of how we met. He could have sold you to Castellano's people before we eliminated them. But he didn't. No, he was saving that information for additional leverage if his initial cooperation wasn't enough to satisfy federal prosecutors. Dante's reflection in the rain-streaked glass looked haggard, older than his years. Giovanni planned to serve me up piece by piece until he'd bought himself complete immunity. Where is he now? The question slipped out before I could consider whether I really wanted the answer. Gone. Permanently. Dante's voice carried no satisfaction, only weary finality. Luca handled it personally after Giovanni confessed. Quick and clean, as these things go. I wanted to feel horror at the casual discussion of execution, wanted my moral compass to spin wildly at this latest transgression against the civilized world I'd once inhabited. Instead, I felt only a hollow sort of relief that the immediate threat had been neutralized. What happens now? Now we rebuild. New security protocols, new communication systems, new people in positions of trust. The federal investigation will eventually stall without Giovanni's continued cooperation. They'll move on to other targets, other crimes. Dante turned from the window, his expression unreadable in the dim light. And you decide whether you can live with the knowledge of what I did tonight. Did you pull the trigger yourself? No, but I ordered it done, watched it happen, approved the disposal of the body. The distinctions matter legally, but not morally. Giovanni's death is on my hands regardless of who actually killed him. I studied his face in the rain-dimmed moonlight, searching for signs of the ruthless predator who could order executions without flinching. Instead, I saw exhaustion, pain, and something that might have been grief for the man Giovanni had been before greed corrupted 15 years of loyalty. You're not what I expected, I said finally. What did you expect? A monster. Someone who enjoyed the violence, who saw killing as a solution to every problem. Instead, you look like a man who just lost a friend and hates himself for what that loss required. Dante moved closer, close enough that I could see the lines of strain around his eyes, could smell the rain and something darker clinging to his clothes. Do you want to leave, Isabella? After tonight, after seeing exactly what choosing me means, do you want me to arrange for you to disappear? The question hung between us like a bridge I could either cross or burn. On one side lay safety, normalcy, the comfortable illusions of a world where good and evil wore clearly marked uniforms. On the other side was this dangerous, complicated man who killed to protect those under his care and looked devastated by the necessity. I want you to tell me something, I said instead of answering. When you ordered Giovanni's death, what did you feel? Rage, betrayal, grief for the friendship he'd destroyed, relief that the threat was over, guilt that I hadn't seen it coming sooner. He sat heavily in the chair by my window, suddenly looking every one of his 38 years. I felt human, Isabella. Fallible and angry and protective of everything I've built. Is that what you wanted to hear? It's what I needed to hear. I moved to stand before him, close enough to see the vulnerability he was trying so hard to hide. Because it means you're not a sociopath. You're just a man making impossible choices in an impossible world. A man who orders executions. A man who protects his family from people who would destroy them. The distinction mattered to me, even if it wouldn't matter to a judge or jury. Do you regret it? I regret that it was necessary. I regret that Giovanni chose greed over loyalty. I regret that you had to learn about this side of my life in such a brutal way. But do I regret stopping him from selling information that could have gotten you killed? No. I'd do it again tomorrow if I had to. The honest brutality of his answer should have sent me running. Instead, it settled something restless in my chest, answering questions I hadn't known I was asking. This was who he was. Not a monster, not a saint, but a man who drew lines in blood and sand and defended them with everything he had. I'm not leaving, I said quietly. Not because of this, not because of anything. Whatever we're building here, whatever this becomes, I'm in. Relief flooded his features so completely that it took my breath away. He reached for me, pulling me down onto his lap with careful reverence, as though I might disappear if he held too tight. You realize what you're choosing, he said against my hair. Not just me, but everything that comes with me. The violence, the moral compromises, the constant awareness that our enemies would kill you to hurt me. I realize that you've given me more protection, more security, more honest affection in 2 months than I found in 26 years of playing by society's rules. I pulled back to meet his gaze directly. I realized that you could have hidden tonight's events from me, could have pretended Giovanni simply transferred to another position or retired early. But you didn't. You trusted me with the truth, even knowing it might drive me away. And that matters to you. Everything about you matters to me. His hands framed my face with infinite gentleness. Which is why I need you to be very sure about this choice, Isabella. Because once you're fully part of this world, truly committed to this life, there's no going back to who you were before. I leaned into his touch, letting the warmth of his palms chase away the chill that had settled in my bones. The woman I was before was drowning in debt, watching her family suffer while she served coffee to people who barely saw her as human. This version of myself, whatever her moral complications, at least has the power to protect the people she loves. Even if that power comes with a price. Everything worthwhile comes with a price. The question is whether you're willing to pay it. We sat together in the rain-soaked darkness, two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of their previous lives and chosen to build something new from the pieces. Outside, Lake Como stretched toward distant mountains, beautiful and dangerous and eternal. Like the choice I'd made. Like the man who held me as though I was something precious worth protecting at any cost. The federal investigation faded over the following weeks, lack of evidence and cooperating witnesses eventually forcing prosecutors to pursue more promising targets. Dante's operations resumed their careful balance of legitimate business and less legal activities, though with heightened security measures that made the villa feel more like a fortress than a home. New faces appeared among the staff, replacing those deemed potential security risks in the wake of Giovanni's betrayal. Luca took on expanded responsibilities, his loyalty tested and proven absolute during the crisis. Francesca remained my steady companion, her quiet wisdom helping me navigate the complexities of my new existence. My family's calls became easier as weeks passed, distance allowing me to compartmentalize the deception more effectively. Emma's excited reports about their mother's improving health served as daily reminders that some lies served purposes more important than abstract moral principles. When my mother mentioned taking that painting class she'd always wanted to try, the lightness in her voice erased any lingering guilt about the source of her newfound financial security. The days settled into new rhythms. Mornings began with coffee on the terrace, Dante and I discussing everything from literature to philosophy, to the operational details of running a criminal enterprise. He proved surprisingly well-read, his insights into human nature sharpened by years of studying people's weaknesses and motivations. I found myself looking forward to these conversations, the intellectual intimacy as seductive as any physical attraction. Afternoons often meant accompanying him to meetings with legitimate business partners, playing the role of personal assistant with increasing confidence. I learned to read the subtle signals that indicated when discussions were moving into territories I shouldn't hear, developed an instinct for when my presence was welcome versus when discretion demanded strategic absence. Evenings belonged to us alone. Sometimes we explored the villa's extensive grounds, Dante sharing stories of how he'd acquired the property, the improvements he'd made, the security measures hidden behind landscape design. Other times we simply sat by the lake, comfortable in silences that spoke of growing intimacy. It was during one of these quiet evenings that he told me about the first man he'd killed. We'd been discussing the ethics of self-defense when the conversation turned unexpectedly personal. I was 19, he said, staring out at the water where moonlight painted silver paths across dark waves. My father's lieutenant had decided the old man was past his prime, that the organization needed younger leadership. He arranged an ambush during what should have been a routine business meeting. What happened? I was supposed to be in class, but I'd skipped university that day to accompany my father. When the shooting started, pure instinct took over. I put 3 bullets in Roberto Carvelli before I'd fully processed what was happening. Dante's voice remained steady, but I caught the slight tremor in his hands as he reached for his wine glass. Saved my father's life and sealed my own fate in the same moment. No going back after that. No going back, he confirmed. Once you've killed to protect family, once you've proven capable of that level of violence, the life chooses you as much as you choose it. Do you regret it? He considered the question seriously, the way he approached all discussions of moral complexity. I regret the necessity. I regret that Roberto's greed created a situation where violence was the only solution. But do I regret saving my father's life? Never. The pattern of his moral reasoning had become familiar. Regret for necessity, never for the action itself when it served to protect those under his care. It was a framework that made sense in his world, even if it would be incomprehensible to most people living conventional lives. What about you? He asked. Have you ever had to make a choice you knew was wrong but necessary? I thought about stolen medication money, about lies told to protect feelings, about the growing list of deceptions required to maintain my current existence. Every day since I met you, I admitted. Small compromises at first, but they add up. I'm not the same person I was 6 months ago. Are you sorry about that? Sometimes. But mostly I think the person I was before was naive in ways that weren't entirely virtuous. I thought moral purity was possible, that good people could avoid making choices that hurt others. Now I understand that's a luxury most people can't afford. Welcome to adulthood, he said with a smile that held equal parts affection and sadness. It's messier than they tell you it will be. 3 months after the federal raid, Dante surprised me with news that would change everything once again. We were reviewing architectural plans for a new hotel project when he set aside the blueprints and fixed me with the expression that meant serious conversation was imminent. I've made a decision about Chicago, he said without preamble. We're returning next week. My coffee cup rattled against its saucer as I set it down with unsteady hands. Is it safe? Safe enough. The federal investigation has moved on to other targets. Castellano's remaining associates have either been absorbed into other organizations or eliminated. The immediate threats that forced our exile have been neutralized. Relief and anxiety warred in my chest. I'd missed Chicago's familiar chaos, missed being close enough to visit my family, missed the illusion of normalcy that came with living in a place where I understood the rules. But I'd also grown comfortable with the protective isolation of the villa, the distance from complications and moral ambiguities. What about us? I asked. What changes when we go back? Everything and nothing. Dante moved around the table to stand behind my chair, his hands settling on my shoulders with familiar warmth. We'll have to be more careful about appearances, more discreet about the nature of our relationship. But the fundamentals remain the same. What fundamentals? That you're under my protection. That your family's welfare is guaranteed. That whatever this is between us continues to grow without interference from outside pressures. The careful way he avoided defining our relationship spoke to how much remained unresolved between us. We'd moved beyond employer and assistant, beyond protector and protected, but neither of us had been brave enough to put words to what we were becoming. And my family, I pressed. Will I be able to see them again? Carefully, gradually, with extensive security precautions. But yes, it's time to stop living like prisoners of our own choices. The flight back to Chicago passed in contemplative silence. Below us, the Atlantic spread to distant horizons, marked only by the occasional ship making its solitary way between continents. I thought about the woman who'd made this journey in reverse months earlier, fleeing toward unknown sanctuary in the company of armed guards who treated her like valuable cargo. This return felt different. Less like evacuation, more like homecoming. I was returning not as a victim or a refugee, but as someone who'd chosen this life with full knowledge of its costs and complications. Dante's Chicago residence proved different from my expectations. Instead of the fortress-like mansion I'd imagined, The building was an elegant converted brownstone in Lincoln Park, its exterior so normal it would blend seamlessly into its gentrified neighborhood. Only the subtle security cameras and the slightly too attentive landscaping crew hinted at anything unusual about the occupants. The interior continued the theme of understated luxury. Artwork that belonged in galleries hung beside family photographs that suggested normal domestic life. The kitchen looked designed for actual cooking rather than mere display. Guest rooms were appointed for comfort rather than intimidation. "This is beautiful," I said, running my fingers along the smooth granite of the kitchen island. "It feels like a home rather than a headquarters." That was the intention. Dante watched me explore with an expression of nervous anticipation. I wanted somewhere we could build something real, somewhere that felt like ours rather than just mine. The casual use of the word ours made my pulse quicken. "You're assuming I'll stay. I'm hoping you'll choose to." He moved closer, close enough that I could see uncertainty in his usually confident expression. "We've never really discussed what happens next, what you want our arrangement to become." The conversation I'd been avoiding since that night in the villa hallway finally demanded attention. "What are you asking me, Dante?" "I'm asking if you'd consider making this permanent. Not just the protection, not just the employment arrangement, but this. Us." His hands gestured to encompass the space between us, the careful domesticity he'd created, the life he was offering. "I'm asking if you'd consider staying not because you have to, but because you want to." The weight of the question settled between us like a challenge waiting to be accepted or declined. Everything I'd learned about his world, every moral compromise I'd witnessed and participated in, every danger that came with loving someone who solved problems with violence, balanced against the security he offered, the protection for my family, the genuine affection I'd grown to depend on. "And if I say yes, what does that make me? Your kept woman. Your willing accomplice. Your partner in crime. It makes you whatever you choose to be." His voice was soft but steady. "I'm not asking you to become someone you're not, Isabella. I'm asking you to be who you are, here, with me, for as long as you can stand it. Even knowing what you do for a living. Especially knowing what I do for a living. You've seen me at my worst, watched me order executions and justify violence, and you're still here. If you can accept that part of me, the rest should be manageable." I moved to the window overlooking the small garden behind the brownstone, buying time to organize thoughts that felt tangled beyond reason. A normal couple would discuss career plans, family expectations, financial goals. We were negotiating the terms of a relationship built on murder, moral flexibility, and mutual protection arrangements. What would this look like practically? I asked without turning around. Day-to-day life, public appearances, the logistics of being involved with someone the federal government considers a criminal. "Carefully managed," he replied. "You'd need a new identity for certain situations, additional security training, protocols for emergencies. But also dinner reservations, theater tickets, arguments about whose turn it is to take out the garbage. The normal complications of sharing space with another person." Despite everything, I found myself smiling at the image of Chicago's most feared crime boss fretting over household chores. And my family would remain under protection, with gradually increased contact as security permits. Emma finishes nursing school next year. Perhaps she'd like help finding a position at one of the better hospitals. Your mother's medical care would continue through private physicians who specialize in her condition. You've thought about this extensively. I've thought about little else since we returned from Italy. His footsteps approached behind me, but he stopped just short of touching, giving me space to make this decision without the influence of physical proximity. "I love you, Isabella. Not who I think you could become, not some idealized version of what I want in a partner, but exactly who you are right now. Brave enough to take a bullet for a stranger, stubborn enough to argue with me when you think I'm wrong, smart enough to understand the complexities of the world we'd be building together." The words I'd been afraid to hear, afraid to hope for, afraid to reciprocate. Love in the context of our situation carried implications that went far beyond normal romantic relationships. Love meant complicity, meant choosing his world over the conventional one, meant accepting that my happiness was built on foundations that would horrify most people. "I love you too," I said to my reflection in the window glass. "God help me, but I do." His relief was audible, a soft exhalation that spoke to anxiety I hadn't realized he was carrying. "Does that mean yes?" I turned to face him finally, this complicated man who'd offered me everything I'd never known I wanted at a price I was still learning to calculate. It means yes to all of it. The danger, the moral complications, the beautiful house, the family protection, the life I never imagined choosing. He crossed the remaining distance between us in 2 quick steps, gathering me into his arms with careful reverence despite the obvious joy in his expression. When he kissed me, it tasted like promises and possibilities, like decisions made and consequences accepted. We stood together in the Chicago afternoon light, 2 people who'd found each other in the wreckage of circumstances neither had planned. Outside, the city hummed with its familiar rhythms of ambition and survival. Inside, we began the delicate work of building something worth protecting, something worth the prices we'd both agreed to pay. The bullet that had brought us together had indeed changed everything, marking not just the end of one life and the beginning of another, but the start of something entirely new. Not victim and savior, not captor and captive, but partners in the complicated business of loving someone dangerous enough to keep you safe and gentle enough to make safety feel like home.